Well, welcome everyone to the May 2024 meeting of Portland Photographers Forum. I'm Bob Bergstrom and I will be your host for tonight. Tonight's featured speaker is Linda Robertson, who is an encaustic wax artist and was trained as a photographer. Eric Brody will be our 15-minute member speaker. First, we'll start with some announcements, and then we'll play the photo challenge. I guess the big announcement is the PPF outing with Lens Baby is coming up on June 13th. So we'll meet at the Rose Garden at 9 in the morning. June 13th is a Thursday. A sales rep from Lens Baby is going to come and bring some demos of their Omni filter system. The Omni system has crystals and prisms and such that you put on the front of your lens, so they'll fit on any camera make. This particular sales rep is also a sales rep for Tamron, is going to bring some Tamron lenses that you can try on your camera also. The thing is, the outing is free, but we do ask that you pre-register for it so we know how many people are coming. And if you go on the PPF website, we ask if you would download the liability release form and sign it and bring it when you come. We will bring some extras just in case. But I would ask that you sign up at the, if you just send me an email at president@portlandphotographersforum.com, and I think I put the link in the newsletter. So that was nice that they came through after several back and forths with them. The rep's name is Ben Hutchinson. I don't know if anybody knows him. I don't know him, but he's now a sales rep for Tamron, and he used to be a sales rep for Lens Baby. So we'll get some of each. Linda Robertson, who is our featured speaker tonight, is going to lead a workshop at her home studio for PPF members about encaustic wax, and she'll talk more about that, but the date of that has been moved up. She had to move it up to July 7th, which is, I believe, on a Sunday. And also on the newsletter and on the Facebook group, there's the link to sign up for that. She can take 6 people in her studio. She provides all of the equipment and all of the wax, and all you will need to bring is an 8x10 black and white print on matte paper, because the matte paper will soak up the wax, and then she will go from there. Mark Fitzgerald will be leading an iPhone photography workshop at Oregon Society of Artists on Sunday, June the 9th. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. Kathy, did you want to mention something about the Lightbox Gallery in Astoria?
Yes, or just a reminder that Lightbox Gallery in Astoria, Oregon is having a members exhibit. For those of you that are members of Lightbox, the deadline is coming up, which is Sunday, May 26th, and there's no theme. You can enter any photograph you like, and the exhibit's going to run from June 8th to July 10th.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. And Tim Dallas, did you want to make give us an update about Blue Sky, who's in the drawers this month? And
yeah, sure. Currently for April and May, Ingrid Arnett and Steve Long have been in the drawers, and they'll be in there through the near the end of May. So if you haven't gotten over there to see the work, if you get a chance, that would be great. I think on May 29th is the date that they've worked out to swap out for June, July. We'll have Al Flory and Doug Rundle in the drawers. And we also recently put out a call specifically to new members to see if some of them might be interested in exhibiting in the drawers. And I've heard from a couple folks. I actually been communicating with Dan Rappaport, who I've got him scheduled for August, September. And we've got Larry Thompson, I think you're on, I think I saw you in the call. We've got you scheduled for October, November. So we're starting to fill up slots, but I still have a slot for August, September, another one for October, November, and then beyond that. So if anyone who has not exhibited there for a long time or has never done it, or particularly new members, if you're interested at all, please just let me know and I'll give you information and we'll go from there.
Good. Thanks, Tim. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does anyone have want to announce if you have any things in a gallery or a show or a magazine or a library or a coffee shop?
Where?
I do.
Oh,
This is Mike Osborne talking. I've got a show up right now for the rest of the month of May in the Aurora Gallery on Main Street in Vancouver. It's right across from the Kiggins Theater, if you know where that is. It's automotive abstracts.
And Mike, how long does that go through?
Till the end of May.
Till the end of May. Okay, great.
what gallery is that?
It's called the Aurora Gallery, like the Northern Lights.
It's a spectacular exhibit too.
I paid her to say that.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
I have an exhibit at the Morse Coffee Shop in Lake Oswego for the month of June.
Okay, wonderful.
What's it gonna be?
It's kind of a composite, mostly portraiture.
Okay.
Where's that coffee shop?
It's on First and A, right around the corner from Tillamook Ice Creamery.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and yeah, there's like a 5-year wait list. You can sign up and they give you the whole gallery. The whole shop is, yeah.
Oh, I'll stop by.
It's diagonally across from Salt and Straw.
It is.
You want expensive ice cream?
Yeah. Too expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
Oh, that's
It-
exciting. Cool.
anyone else that has an exhibit going on?
Well, I had a couple of, this is Giannis. I had a couple of prints accepted in A. Smith Gallery in a competition they had for Town and Country. And Pat Rose also had a couple accepted for that. And then I don't know like how judges decide these things, but they even chose one of my photographs to be, they do a book. They choose from all the 400, 500 participants. They choose 27, and one of my prints got accepted to be in the 27 to be in it's an actually printed book that they do.
Okay, anyone else? Why don't we move ahead then, and we will start the slideshow for the photo challenge. So this month's topic for the photo challenge was interesting people. I'm starting to repeat the topics from last year, and interesting people was one of the very popular ones from last year. Just as a side note, if you submit for the photo challenge, it doesn't have to be something you made that month or even this year. It just something that's relevant to the topic, and nobody judges it. So it's however you feel like your images fit the topic. So let me go ahead and start the slideshow. Do my screen share. And I believe that we have music if okay, it says share sound, so it's on share sound, so I think we should have music. So the slideshow runs for 15 minutes.
We aren't getting the music, Bob.
Well, thanks everyone who participated. Let me get it to stop screen sharing. Okay, Mark, it's good I made you the co-host because it crashed. But we're back. Thanks everyone who participated and submitted photos for the photo challenge. Next month, we'll do the topic geometry, texture, and architecture. And you should be getting information in next month's newsletter about that. So tonight's member speaker is Eric Brody. Eric, are you here? And do you want to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, gotcha.
Oh, good.
Good.
Okay, very well.
Many of you will know Eric from the monthly print share meetings. Eric is a regular contributor at the print share, and so we invited him to come and speak tonight for 15 minutes. So Eric, if you want to do your screen share, and we'll get started.
Okay, hold on.
Perfect.
Okay. I always tell people that I have two hobbies. One is photography, art, composition, and the other is gear and toys. And I confess to being a toy person. That's not an original idea. It came from a guy named Philip Reeve in Germany, but end up with lots of toys. I'm going to just go through these photographs, I think, and maybe chat a little bit at the end. This is Jack Dykinga, one of my major heroes, a Pulitzer Prize winner and 10-year lung transplant recipient. This was done in California. Taken a bunch of workshops with him, and actually I'm doing one next month. This is Jay Dussard, otherwise known as Captain Ferrocyanide from the film and paper days. This was done in Brody. He is also an incredibly wonderful photographer and teacher and won a Guggenheim. This is John Sexton, another one of my mentors, his wife, Anne, who's an extraordinary photographer in her own right, and Ray McSavany, who has sadly passed on. And most of you probably know Stu Levy, and he's also one of my first contacts with photography in the Portland area. And there's me, and in the Alabama hills. I started all this stuff when I was about 9, and my uncle taught me how to do contact prints from these big old family negatives. And it was very cool, of course, seeing a picture come up in the developer tray. So I did lots of pictures. I did pictures in high school. I went to college at a small school in upstate New York, and they had a photography program there that was run by a guy named Michael Hoffman. He went on to found Aperture Magazine, which is hopefully known to many of you. And while I was there, he arranged for what was called a workshop. I had never heard of this before. I was an 18-year-old kid. And he brought this fellow up from Rochester who was very interesting, very unusual, and very smart, and quite a wonderful photographer. His name was Minor White, and most of you probably know him. So that's the sort of the background of my interest in photography. I started here in Portland when I moved out here and met Stu Levy, and he had just started a group here a couple of years before with Brooks Jensen, who does Lenswork Magazine, Stuart Harvey, who's well known to many people in town, and a bunch of other folks. So that was the beginning of PPW, Portland Photographers Workshop. Then it became PPF, which is what we do now. So I'm going to just continue with the photographs. We're now in New Zealand, my favorite place where my daughter lives. This is Rangitoto Island, and the Maori refer to New Zealand as Aotearoa, and it translates to land of the long white cloud. And I thought that kind of captured it a little bit. This is Te Puia, a geyser or geezer, since I'm a geezer too, on the North Island. This is Doubtful Sound on the South Island. Beautiful, beautiful place. This is a sheep farm that my son-in-law's uncle had for a long time, and a lovely sunset. We spent some time in New Plymouth, a little town on the southwest coast of the North Island, and they had these really interesting sculptures, which I could not resist. And another Land of the Long White Cloud image. This is done in Whangamata, which is the small town on the North Island where my daughter lives. This view is from her home. They have such wonderful clouds there. And I've made this same image with these same trees and many, many times. And I happened to, this one finally worked. Now we're going to Florida, where I had relatives for many years. This is some kissing great blue herons. Incredibly, a place called Wakota, which is a water treatment facility where they have all these wonderful birds, like this one, an egret in breeding plumage. And this one, a great blue heron landing. And this one, a white egret, a great egret, and also in breeding plumage, taking off. And this is the guy you don't want to meet in the duckweed. That eye looks very scary to me. It always has. Now we go to the Southwest, where I've done a bunch of workshops with John Sexton and Ray McSavany and Bruce Barnbaum. And these are pictographs. This is the famous Antelope Canyon, allegedly photographically discovered by Bruce Barnbaum before it became basically what it is now, which is a tourist trap. It's very sad. Many years ago, I spent a couple of hours down there before it got popular, and I was the only one down there for quite a while. It almost got a little scary. This is the Virgin River in Zion. This is the famous White House ruin in Canyon de Chelly. And the sand dunes in Death Valley. This is Tenaya Lake. Made this picture when Yosemite was closed because the government shut down. And they said that I was allowed to drive through because it's a state road from the east, but I was told I could not stop. And of course, I could not recreate was the term the ranger used, but I did. This is Weston Lake, also in Yosemite. Lots of images of this really beautiful spot. This is the famous chair in the house that you can get into in Brody. I had the privilege of spending about an hour and a half, 2 hours there, just the two of us with Ray McSavany and I, and our respective view cameras. And one of the great, the man, he didn't speak much and he didn't speak often, but when he spoke, it was pure gold. It was just great. These are some aspen trees in June Lake on a workshop with John Sexton. And this is Dead Horse Point, the state park in Utah, near Moab. This is in Bears Ears, a beautiful, spectacular spot that a former chief executive was trying to turn into an oil field. Fortunately, that didn't happen yet. We'll see. Beautiful, beautiful spot. These are some pictographs in Canyon de Chelly. It was the Canyon de los Muertos, and I'm not an expert on either the archaeology or the Spanish language. But if you look really close, you can actually see, they did such incredible detail, you can actually see the trigger on the guns that these people did. They killed lots and lots of the Native Americans. The Spaniards did at that time. Unfortunate. Now we're leaving the Southwest and heading up here. Our family has a home and place above White Salmon, Washington, in the gorge. And this was Christmas Eve, in a blinding snowstorm. You can't really see all of it. In the print, you can actually see the snow driving down. And I've been working on this same tree in many seasons for many, many years. It's a beautiful tree. This is also shot at that same location because you can see Mount Hood when it's available. And the clouds that day were just unreal, absolutely unreal. Now we're going to Central Oregon. This is the famous jail in Antelope. Antelope, famous for the Rajneeshis, but this is the original jail. And this is a little home, probably get into there fairly cheap, in Kent, Oregon. A trip I make once a year or so out there to just, because it's so beautiful. And this is Fort Stevens. Almost all of mine and most other people's work at Fort Stevens is done in black and white. And I went out there one day and just decided to shoot in color and see what happens. It's kind of interesting. Overdid the colors perhaps, but it's still kind of interesting. This picture everybody thinks was made of Mount St. Helens, but it was actually in 2006 on the way to the coast after an unbelievably horrendous windstorm. And that hillside now has now been completely cleared and replanted and looks nothing like this, which is a very strong argument for making photographs when you can, because it might not be the same the next time you go. This is shot at the Hesed Head Lighthouse Bed and Breakfast. We stayed there many years ago, and we had one beautiful day and one really rainy day. But the windows were very cool because they distorted a lot of stuff. You can see that in the fence down below. The fence wasn't really like that. It was a decent fence. That is arguably my personally most famous image, done in 2001 with a view camera at the Shore Acres workshop with Stu Levy and Don, blocking on his name, sorry. But Don Kirby, who is a wonderful, wonderful teacher, wonderful teacher. This is the inside of a railroad car at Camp 18, which is a restaurant on the way to the beach on 26. Officially, you're not supposed to go in there, but I snuck in and nobody seemed to have a problem with it. It was a lot of fun playing with the wide angle lens. This is my favorite image of Seal Rock, also on the beach, on the coast, on a kind of a foggy day with a very, very long exposure to catch all the smooth water and smooth fog.
Eric, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I think I'll make it. This is Shore Acres State Park. I went to the Shore Acres workshop again with Stu Levy last August, and the weather was just spectacular. Just a beautiful, beautiful spot. Those of you who have not been to Shore Acres need to go. This is at Bandon, and actually I'm going back down to Bandon first week in June to do a workshop with Jack Dykinga, who is might be one of his last ones since he's getting on. But beautiful, beautiful spot. And the PPF has historically gone down to the Dahlia Farm in Canby. This was one of the many I made many years ago, but it was just a really nice flower. Now we're going into the gorge. This is the upper Lateral Falls on a hike I did. I hike up there a lot. And this is Horsetail in the winter. Actually bumped into Austin Granger, who many of you know, on that trip. It's kind of interesting. He's a nice guy. And this is the classic Multnomah Falls picture that many people have taken in the winter. And this is punch bowl. And I was just up there the other day, and you cannot see this anymore. Another example of get it while you can, because there's just a ton of debris and there is no more view of the falls from below. You can see it from above from the trail, but nothing like this. And really sad that you can't get a good look at it. Now we're going to jump a little bit to the Galapagos. Did a wonderful trip to the Galapagos in 2014, and that's a blue-footed booby. That's a lava lizard sitting on top of a marine iguana. That's the classic Galapagos tortoise. And that's a turtle swimming in the ocean, just beautiful colors. The water really was that color. And now Sauvie Island. Made this picture many, many years ago just for fun, because that truck is still there, but it sure isn't bright red anymore. Although the statue of the Madonna there is still there, and they still put flowers in that thing every year. Really lovely, lovely spot. This is also Sauvie Island. You can tell I like the wide perspective sometimes. Cornfield. This is the nicest cabbage I've ever seen, and it really was that color blue. Also Sauvie Island. And this is the house, blocking on the name of the house, but in the fall when the colors were really lovely. And this is one I actually showed at the print share not that long ago, showing Mount Adams and the moon and some birds and an old barn. A lot of fun there. This is again up at our place in the gorge, just some wonderful trees. This is a stump that I've been working on for 30, 40 years in Tryon Creek State Park. It's no longer like that at all, but it's fun. Every time I go through there, I try and make an image. This is in Yosemite on a workshop I did with Charlie Kramer, and just spectacular foliage and stuff. This is at the other end of El Capitan Meadow, just a bunch of birch trees with lots and lots of detail. This is also in El Capitan Meadow. There's a little church, you have to look for it beyond the trees. This is the Goodnoe Hills, this old school building that many people have photographed, really quite spectacular. And a lot of people have taken pictures of the tree in the garden, in the Japanese garden, but I was fortunate to grab this one in winter with the snow. It's frequently closed when there's snow. This was a while back. This is another one from the Japanese garden when in the fall with the fall foliage. And I like this one because it was an iris, a fish, and a waterfall. And this is the last image. It's a calla lily, obviously. I showed this at a print share. This was shot at the Portland Nursery, just happened to be there, and it was right there and had a lot of fun. So that's what I do. I do it almost every day. I love to print. I love to walk around and shoot. Sort of what people refer to as a hunter-gatherer, just grab what I can. And I have enjoyed being at this for almost 70 years, not quite. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Eric, will you take a few questions? If anybody
bet.
has a question for Eric? If anyone has a question, just feel free to unmute.
Eric, it's Kathleen Wendland. I really love your work.
Thank you.
And I just jotted down the lighthouse, so that I love the perspective you get on things through the window, and then the truck at Sauvie Island. I have photographed that so many times, and I love the perspective you saw on that. That's a way I've never looked at it. And do you use a view camera a lot, or you mentioned wide angle also?
Well, I gave up the view camera quite a while ago, and like most of us, I'm all digital now. I miss the view camera in some ways. I used to miss the darkroom, but I don't miss the darkroom anymore. When I moved to Oregon in 1979, I built a really nice darkroom in our home. And until we left that house, this home where I live now is the first house I've lived in Oregon that didn't have it. I've had lived in 2 homes in Oregon, both of which had really nice darkrooms that I built or had built. And but now I sit upstairs in my office with a big screen and a printer, and I love it. I just love the computer. I love Photoshop. I love Lightroom, and I just have more fun than you can imagine.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
Hey, Eric, this is Giannis, and I have
Hi,
a
Giannis.
question. It's like, I really appreciated the diversity of your images, and those birds were incredible. And
Yeah.
you really get around too. And I'm wondering, like, that incredible array of diverse images, how do you know the exact moment to trip that shutter? You know, what is it that sparks inside of you that says, okay, it's time?
I guess it's like the old joke about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Most of the stuff I do is in the landscape, the timing is not that critical. Obviously, with birds and wildlife, it's hard. I find wildlife photography to be very, very difficult. The landscape is a whole lot easier. And I don't really have an easy answer to your question, Giannis. It's just when it feels right. And of course, with digital, you know, you can set it to 3 frames, 4 frames a second, push the button and hold it, and then have to sort them out later. But I don't like the term spray and pray, but that's what people do sometimes in wildlife photography. The place I went down there in Wakota, there were a bunch of guys with these 800 millimeter Canon lenses, and they would be sitting there, and a bird would fly in. They'd all grab the lenses and they go, and it was sort of like almost like in the World War II when a kamikaze is coming in, they just fire off, and then when the bird lands, they stop and they start talking to one another. So they probably get 200-300 pictures at a shot, and I don't know how they ever sort them out.
Hey, Eric, this is Mike.
Yes, yes, Mike.
I think you should expect to hear from the rangers in Yosemite about recreating without a permit.
Well, I got chased away from Olmsted Point that day by a ranger. They didn't catch me at Denia Lake. Thanks.
Okay. Well, Eric, thanks so much. Those were
Thank
really
you.
wonderful images, and
Thanks for everybody's patience.
thanks for going through those with us. Our featured speaker tonight is Linda Robertson. Linda, are you here? And can you unmute?
I am here. Yes.
Okay,
Hi.
okay, good. I've known Linda for probably 2 or 3 years now and have taken several of her classes. Linda is an encaustic wax artist based in Portland, but soon to move to Vancouver. She teaches workshops out of her studio. She was trained as a photographer, but now pretty much exclusively does encaustic wax painting. And she is an instructor in the year-long Painting with Fire course, which how many instructors are in that course, Linda?
There are 26, so we each do 2 classes throughout the year.
And it's once a week?
It's once a week. You get a recorded class that has that you have full access to forever, and it is all about a particular technique in encaustic painting. And some of them are photo encaustic, some are more very experimental or more painting related. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, I connected with Linda again at the Aurora Gallery a few months back when we were all there for the show that Johanna King and Kathy Rady and Pat Rose had. And Linda was there, and so we talked about if we might get her to talk to us. So Linda, thanks for coming to speak with us tonight, and I'll let you go ahead, and if you want to just talk first or start your screen share or however you want to go.
Okay, thanks. And thanks so much for having me. I'm gonna just speak for a minute and then I'll get to the screen share. But it was so nice to meet so many of you at the gallery. Um, and it was so nice to see all of your work too. I mean, it was just amazing. So so thank you for having me. I have been doing photography, you know, like most of you, forever, right? Like the moment I found a camera, it was like, what's this? I must have all these things. And I went to school for photography and at Humboldt State College, and I ended up with doing all sorts of different material, using all sorts of different materials, which seems to be the theme of my life. So I did cyanotypes and gum bichromate prints and Van Dyke prints and everything that you had to mix your own emulsion and paint it on the paper, and very much experimental stuff. My pinhole cameras, I loved those too. I'm sure some of you have used those. But I eventually found my way to working with photography and wax together, and now I also just paint with the wax. I'm going to show you some of that tonight, but I also want to show you, give you a little peek into just this wonderful moment in my life. I got a scholarship to work on the 20 by 24 Polaroid camera when I was in college. And if you are not familiar with that, it is just an enormous camera. There were at one point, I think, 5 of them in the world. We might be down to 3 now. And it truly is a camera that produces instant prints at 20 by 24 inches. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that first because I thought you might be interested, and then I'll move on to the encaustic work. So let me pull up my slideshow. See, I think we're going to be here and there.
Good, we can see your screen. Perfect.
Okay, good. And is it full screen for you?
So now it's full screen.
Success. All right, terrific. Okay, so I will start with the 20 by 24 camera because I don't know a lot of people who have had a chance to work on it. If you are not familiar with it, I've got a few slides here to sort of show you what that is. It is an enormous camera. They wheel it in. They had to fly this in from New York, and I was at Humboldt State in California at the time. So I got a scholarship from California State University, their summer arts program. And I was so excited. So we got to work on the camera for 2 days, not a long time, but we had a few days run up to sort of work on view cameras and work our way up to that size. But this camera was created in 1976, and it truly, I want to give you something here that gives you an idea of the scale. So that's how big this camera is. This is Chuck Close working, doing one of his very close-up portraits with this camera. And for us, because we were students, the camera came with its own technician. So John Reuter came from New York and helped us all figure out how to do our projects on this. And we all helped each other as crew through the whole thing. But many very famous artists have worked on this camera. This is Andy Warhol on the right and Mary Ellen Mark on the left. And just the detail of this camera is incredible. It is just amazing to see the difference in images from this camera that is producing an image that is, you know, 1-to-1 at 20 by 24 inches, as opposed to trying to use a tiny little Polaroid camera for something. So this is one of my images on the right, and then the setup for that on the left. Thank you for making me go through my archives, because as I'm moving, I am about to take some equipment to Free Geek, and I would probably have lost these if I weren't doing this presentation. But I was very interested in projecting images onto whatever I was taking a photograph of. We raided the theater department and found mannequins and masks and this strange styrofoam that looks like concrete. And we all just started putting together our still lives for this. Because I have images projected or text projected on my images, and the light is so low. That is truly a lit candle, and very little other lighting. I had a technical challenge because the exposure was going to be so long, and we had the camera on the second floor of a building, that my exposures were 7 minutes. And after the tests, they indicated that no one could walk around the floor even because it was shaking the camera. So we all had to sit still for 7 minutes to get my exposures. But it wouldn't have happened without John Reuter and his technical knowledge. But really just wonderful. This is a very, very young and skinny Linda on the left. I don't look like that anymore, but yay me. And John Reuter helping me with that, trying to figure out the technical version for this photograph on the right. You can see the camera in the background, and how large that is compared to the people standing around it. This was a really interesting setup as well, because I really loved pasting eyes on things when I was in college. And so this is a real window that I got from the recycling place nearby. I projected text onto that window, and then I pasted those eyes from a magazine. I think that's Liz Taylor's eyes. But there's an actual person standing behind that, and I did three photographs of this. And because we were all helping each other as crew, there are 3 different people in the 3 different photographs, because everyone could only stay for 7 minutes and ran and did something else. So all 3 of these are a little bit different, but that person had to stand as still as possible for that whole length of time. And they did a great job. It came out really well. So I was very pleased with these. And even there's a root down at the bottom here, and even the dirt hanging off the root is so perfect in these photographs. It's really exciting to see. And then this gives you an idea of when they pull that photograph. It is truly that size. When the photograph comes out of the 20 by 24 camera, it comes out the bottom of the area. Let's see here. So it would come out, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right down at the bottom here. And then it gets cut off. You wait, I think it was 2 minutes exposure. And then they would pull that photo and we'd see what we get. I think we all got 9 shots at it. So I ended up with 3 finished photographs, but 9 total. Probably 7 of them are good photographs. We had a couple of tests that had to get done. So, but it was really exciting to work with this. And I just wanted to throw in, this is astonishing to me. This is a William Wegman series. And how do you even line that up with a photograph with a camera like this? And dogs who do not stand still. So I'm very impressed with his work, and I love that he has done some of this work with the 20 by 24. I've put some links on here for you. I'm going to put those in the forum website, or excuse me, the Facebook page. So those will be available for you. That longer one is a video that shows very technically how they load the film and process, how it comes out and is processed. And I thought it might just be of interest to this group because it's so interesting. So, so I will make sure that goes up in the Facebook group after we're done here. All right, and then I'd love to tell you a little bit about Encaustic and photography. As Bob mentioned, I started with photography in college and continued that for quite a while. And I eventually found Encaustic, which is working with, oh, this is my studio, working with beeswax, resin, and pigment. And you mix all of those together and apply everything hot. And so and I'll show you how that works in just a second. But these are the oldest encaustic paintings known. These are 3,000 years old. If you have ever seen a mummy with a picture on the where the faceplate would be, it's very likely that you have seen encaustic painting. So what happened with this is that the ancient Greeks invented the encaustic painting, but they were working in Egypt when this started sort of changing and becoming better known. So the Greeks were working in shipyards, and they would add beeswax to the wooden ships to make them more seaworthy, more waterproof. And eventually someone figured out that if you put some pigment in the beeswax, you could paint titles or numbers or letters on those boats. And eventually that process came off of the boats and onto flat panels. And artists started working in such a way that they could make really beautiful paintings out of this. And if you've ever seen encaustic in person, it does not look like any other type of painting. It has this luminous presence to it, where the light goes through the wax and the pigment and bounces back and gives this just luminous, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous look to it. It's very seductive. So this gives you an idea of how we work with encaustic today. And the little tins there are what's filled with the encaustic paint, which is beeswax, resin, and pigment. Now, of course, when we are doing this back in the old days, they did not have the pancake griddle and the blowtorch and all of the things that we use today. So they used a metal box that was put on hot coal or filled with hot coals, and then the wood panel would be put on top of that box and heated by those coals, and then you would put solid wax on there to draw your image, basically. And so the solid wax would look a little bit more like what's on the right here. So the wood panels on that heated area, and you can use that solid paint to draw into your figure. And the heat fuses that paint into the wood. What you see me doing on the left here is, of course, we're reversed now. So we have the paint hot, the wood is not warmed, although we do heat it up before we add the wax. But once the layers of wax are on there, you can heat it with either a blowtorch or a fairly strong heat gun. I will say that when I first tried this, I thought, well, I'll just use whatever I have. And I ended up trying a wallpaper remover. And it turns out that kind of a heat gun, all it did was blow my wax straight off the panel and onto the wall. So I had quite a mess the first time I tried this. But luckily, that is the same tool that you need to get wax off your wall. So so it all worked out fine. But so it is a matter of layering that wax and adding and subtracting wax until you get what you want. Now you can see here, I'm working with photograph and the wax. And so there's several ways that you can work with encaustic and photography. This particular one that you see here where I'm either adding or subtracting a photograph there, is that you can print the photograph onto tissue paper, something very, very thin. And if you burnish that onto the warm wax and heat it, then the white of the tissue paper completely disappears. And your photograph is embedded in this painting, in this wax painting, and you look like a genius. It's great because it's hard to tell once you're done how that photograph got in there. And that was what just made my heart flutter when I started working with this. And so you can see on this photograph on the right, I am editing a little bit here with the X-Acto knife, some of the edge of that photograph so that I can hide it with some wax. But that is one of the ways that you can work with that. I'll show you a few others as we go through here. This is just a fun one. I took this photograph down at the Sandy River, and even things that are unremarkable, when I take a photograph, I know that they will look different. I can make them look very different when I work with the wax. And so this is something that I had used in demos in classes many times. And so I have many different examples of what it looks like. And you can see that some of the paint is very translucent, and you can see right through to the photograph in almost all of it. Some of it is very opaque, so you can cover up anything you don't want to see. And this one where I have blocked out the water, I've carved back in the trees. So I've just carved right into the wax so you can see through to those tree trunks. And it's really exciting to see all the different ways that you can change a photograph. And when I talk with students who are just starting with encaustic and photography, I suggest that they take one photograph and really try to change it as much as they can to see what can be done. All right, this is another version of how you can use encaustic and photography. This is an old cabinet door from probably the rebuilding center. And I filled the center of it with the encaustic paint, that wax. I added some text that was on tissue paper in the background. And then I cut out some more of some photographs I took of the sunflowers and collaged that in. And in this case, you collage with wax instead of glue, so that if you do something you don't like, you can just heat it up and peel it right off. So it's like a giant undo button, which is very exciting and allows you to really be very, very bold when you start working with this. All right, this is just an example of a couple of different ways I've used the same photograph. This is a picture of my mom and dad on New Year's dancing away. It's one of my favorites of them. And so I have used this a few times in my classes as well. And you can see how, depending on what paint you use, I can just give a little color to a photograph, or I can completely change that and change the focus of what you can see through that wax. All right, this will be a very good example of how this process works. So I wanted to give you this before and after picture. This is my friend's cat, Athena, who is absolutely gorgeous. But they had all this junk in the background of this beautiful picture of her. So this is a little commission. And I wanted to make sure that I could get rid of that and isolate the cat and make a much more interesting photograph than what they were able to give me. So so in this case, the white in the background here, I've put some gesso that is specifically made for encaustic that just preps the surface to receive the wax. But it also, because it's white, I can block out, sort of quiet down a lot of the other things in that photograph. I can do that digitally now, but I kind of enjoy this way of doing it. And then you see the difference down the, not quite the center, but straight vertically down the cat's face. The image, or the part of on the right, already has wax on it, and the part on the left does not. So this gives you a good idea of what the wax does to that photograph. It darkens everything just a little bit, and it also makes the colors a little more vibrant. So, so you want to think about, when you're choosing a photograph for working with encaustic, you want to think about as if the photograph were a piece of paper that were wet. It gives you a very different look. And in working with encaustic, I have started taking my photographs in a way, or creating my photographs in a way that is appropriate, most appropriate for encaustic. So when I see what I want to take a photograph of, I know what it will look like with the wax on it, and I adjust as I take that photograph now. All right, so here is little Athena with all of her wax on. And then this is just a great example of how you can also draw on the photograph. So the white marks there are water-soluble crayons. not like Crayola. It's Lyra brand or Neo Color 2. And you can do a lot of things even after the photograph has wax on it. So you can give a really rough feel of drawing on it that creates a lot of depth and is really interesting. It's not something you normally would see on a photograph. So I find that really fascinating. All right, and then I'm just going to show you a few things that I've done that are the original photograph and then what it looks like with the wax as a part of it. You can hand color these with all sorts of things. I like to start with black and white photographs quite often so that I can add back in the color whenever I want to with whatever I want. This was, I think this one was colored with oil sticks. So there is a brand called RNF Paints, and they make pigment sticks that also have beeswax in them. And they're especially popular with encaustic painters because they are so compatible with the wax because they already have the beeswax in them. And they're creamy and beautiful, and you can create all of these wonderful wonderful looks with it. And this just evoked more of the mood than I captured with my camera. And I love to be able to change the photographs in such an interesting way. This was on a lavender field in Maui. I'm from Hawaii, so I can't remember what's in here, but there may be a lot of Hawaiian photographs. Also, Eric, thank you for taking me to the Galapagos Islands and New Zealand. They were already on my list, but oh my goodness, I'm so excited now. You bumped them up, so thank you. All right, this is another way that you can use encaustic in photography. So I have on the left a photograph in color and then of course in black and white. I was going to a portrait class, painting portraits in encaustic, and I should have put in the portrait of this, but I also was able to use these photographs I took so that I could make another painting, as you see here. These were printed on computer paper, just regular what you would print off just to make a list or a handout, and that is thicker than that tissue paper that I showed you before. The tissue paper completely disappears in the wax. The photographic or the computer paper, you can see with my face down at the bottom of the finished piece here, it shows a little bit of the color through, but it's not completely transparent. And so this is really fun for faces and for different things. And so I just cut out the edge of this photograph. And in order to get this into the wax, you iron it. So you have a small, like a quilting iron, and I iron that and the wax comes up through the photograph and gives me just a little hint of color, which is very exciting to see. The leaves up top were done in color in the same method, but because they were printed in color and not black and white, I still see the color of the photograph in them. So I just thought this was a nice example of that technique for working with wax. All right, this is a photograph I took in Canada. I was photographing a really interesting wall that had graffiti all over it. And I turned around and I was just so beautiful to me. I just love this little pond that must be man-made. So I really love this photograph. But it's a great example also of ways that you can glue down a photograph first and then add wax on it and add texture to change the look of it. So I'll go back and forth on this a couple of times. This is the original color photograph. I printed it in black and white and then glued it to a panel and added wax and ended up with this. So it's a beautiful hand-colored technique in the background there that's very subtle, but you can see on the tree, it's quite textured, and I've even added a little bit of gold leaf. So this is the original. You'll see those rocks down at the bottom right, I think, disappear. Yeah, they are sort of blocked out a little bit, but it really just gives a beautiful feeling. And this is one that I've done many times as well. So there are many versions of this out in the world. But that's just lovely. And even the cliffs completely go away in this. And I didn't do anything on that digitally. That was just through the wax. All right, I love to use this one in my classes, especially the longer, I used to do week-long classes before COVID. But I take a very unremarkable photograph. Like, I think we can all agree, this is not a great photograph, but I do that really importantly so that students can see what you can do with that, even if it's something that's maybe a throwaway. And so you can add all sorts of different things and change the mood completely on what that photograph is. So in this case, I've just cut out the rocks there and replaced them in slightly different place. Up in the sky, you can see there's a hint of leaves and flowers up there, and that is from pre-printed tissue that we use in class. There is even a dried plant embedded in the water down here, and the rest of it is all the encaustic paint. So I have gone from this to this, and quite quickly. This is probably done in a 3-hour class, maybe even a full day class, but in those we do probably 3 smaller paintings. So folks can really learn how to do it all the way from beginning to end without having to come see me constantly. I love to see you, but I'd like you to be able to do it after one class. So all right, and then this is at Bybee Lake, and I just really love how this translated into encaustic, also with a lot of texture. I made it black and white, and then ended up with this image. And I've put in a rock in the lower right corner. I did this online. During COVID, I did an online class called Your Magical Lens. And I had a lot of photographers coming through with me on Zoom to learn how to do this. And we needed a rock. So that rock ended up down in the lower right corner. But just beautiful, beautiful work. And I also have some of my students' work that I thought you might be interested in because they do so many different things. But Bob, how am I doing on time?
It's about 8:25. Oh, we probably have another 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then if you want to have time for questions.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'll just run through a few of these so you can see. Everyone does something very different, and I'm always really excited to see what they're up to. So this is a beautiful photograph. This was a black and white photograph that was glued down. That's how we worked in that particular class. And then Heather added all sorts of, well, wax for sure. We start with the clear wax called encaustic medium. Then she added different colors of wax and carved into it, especially around the fish. You can carve right into the wax and then fill those lines with pigment stick, with that oil stick. And it gives that feel of drawing that's really quite nice. This is Amanda. She is in Australia. And you can see that photograph at the top portion of this. You can see right through to that black and white photograph. And she's added some pastel color on top of the clear wax so that she can give that a little bit of a hint of color. And then in the foreground, you can see some really strong texture that she's added there. And we do that by using a dry brush, kind of a dry brush technique. So when the wax comes off the palette, it's very liquid when you pick it up. But if you wait even 30 seconds, it will cool so much on your brush that you can do a dry brush across the top of that wax and it picks up all the high points. And then you can have this beautiful texture. It's really fun and exciting to do. Oh, another of Amanda's. Yes, this was really fun. She just blocked out part of the photograph on the right and basically just did an encaustic painting on top of that photograph and then brought them together by having those leaves that she's painted in on the other side. And I love that she had an oval panel for this. It makes it really interesting. This is Eileen. She loves to photograph in cemeteries, and she loves Buddhas. So she has several of those. But in this one, it's especially interesting because these leaves that you see around the statue are dried plants that you can put into the wax and then paint over the top of. So you get that beautiful style of the leaf, that texture of the leaf. But it's completely encased in the wax, so it will never disintegrate. And because she's put colored wax on this, we won't even see if there's any sort of a color change on that. You can also get this effect with stencils, but it's much easier with the plants. And I think Eileen did a great job on this one. Beautiful photograph anyway, but she wanted to enhance the feeling of that sunlight coming down in front of the trees. And so she just dragged the brush, the brush with wax in it, as it was cooling, and it leaves that texture just in this patterning of how the light might be coming down in those sun streaks. And it really just came out beautifully. It could have been terribly overdone, but she did a really wonderful job with it. I believe the rest of it is colored with pastel. So there's nothing on this but clear wax and pastel. Everything else is the photograph behind it. All right, Paula went for it. She absolutely went for it. So she had all of these different photographs that she wanted to put together, and she did a little bit of everything on this. There is a photograph glued to the background with the clear wax over the top, and then she started cutting out other photographs and putting them on top of that, because with the wax you can layer. And as I said before, you're layering in putting the paper down with wax instead of glue. So it's very easy to take something off and reposition it, or just get rid of it altogether. But that wax is very, very strong and will hold those photographs beautifully. All right, this is Paula, and she did a lovely soft focus photograph of these weeds, I believe, and just used the pigment stick, that oil stick, to get those rich, deep colors on top of the clear wax. And you can see the little dots here, especially in the upper right-hand corner. Those are little divots in the wax where it's not completely flat. And when you have that, the pigment stick, that oil stick, picks up every little bit of texture and just gives it an interesting look. And it catches the light as you walk by it, which is really lovely. All right, this is a beautiful photograph that Nancy did of a spider web. And it's a little hard to see here, but she carved the web right into the wax. You could still see it through the wax that she put on top of it. And it just gives a really interesting look to have that texture of that spider web in the photograph itself, or in the wax itself. Another dreamy sort of a look from Nancy. And this photograph was, I believe she glued it down. If I remember correctly, I suggested that she sand it with some light sandpaper to give it, she wanted a really antique, rough look. And so after the photograph was glued down, she sanded it a little bit, got rid of all of the dust from that, and then added the clear wax, and was able to have this very rustic looking photograph, kind of eerie. And then she filled the color in with pastel. And you can use either chalk pastel or oil pastel. It's really quite a nice look. All right. Nancy also works a bit with digital work. So she did construct some of this digitally. That fish showed up in many different photographs she had, and she decided to combine things here. And I just love the look of it. Also, I'm sure done with pastels over the encaustic paint here. Right. And then Penny Gunderson, Penny's actually going to go. I teach in Ireland once a year, and Penny's coming with me in June. So I'll be teaching in Ireland, and I'll get to see her again. But just a beautiful photograph where she has really, there's almost no photograph left of it that you can see. She sort of used it to color in, certainly the hand at the bottom, a little bit of the skirt. But those are not the same eyes, and she's put all sorts of wonderful texture in these wings that she's made here, and just a really successful painting. All right, and so I'm going to wrap up my slideshow here a little bit. I do want to mention that I will be teaching a class on this, and I apologize. It was supposed to be a class for just PPF, but because Bob mentioned I'm moving, I've had to merge classes, and my timeline has moved up unexpectedly, as things do when you move. And so the last class in my studio will be this photo encaustic class. And it is going to be Sunday, July 7th. We had a later date for you all earlier, but now we have, that's the date that we have available. And there are only 4 spots left. So if you're interested in joining me, please do. And I will put that, onto the website as well. And let me see here. I'm just going to open this up. Here you go. So this is the this is a little slideshow on my website about the class that we do. It's a day-long class from 10 to 4 on Sunday, July 7th. Everything is provided for you, but I encourage you to bring your own photographs, and I send you simple directions for how you can print those out, and then you can make your own paintings in this. You can choose to either do a couple of smaller paintings like 5x7 or 6x6, or one larger painting that's, like 8x8 or 8x10. And I just guide everyone through this, and you get to go home with a painting or two and the skills to do this again. Bob's been through this class as well. So hopefully you enjoyed that, Bob.
Very much so. Well, Linda, would you like to take a couple of questions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Linda, this is Giannis, and I had a couple of questions. One is like the workroom. What kind of ventilation do you deal with?
Well, there are all sorts of ways to ventilate, and people tend to be more concerned about encaustic painting because of the hot wax, but it's the same ventilation you would have if you have oil painting or acrylic painting. Really, you just want that, or a dark room, the old dark rooms. So I just have a fan. Actually, I'm going to tilt you there so you can see it. I have a studio that's about 200 square feet. Let's see. There's my fan. So it is basically a large bathroom fan in here. And I had an electrician put that in to make sure that the rating was appropriate for venting this size of room. But if you don't have that, or you're working in a smaller room, like I started at my kitchen table and eventually moved into a small bedroom, you can also put a fan in the window, and the fan should be taking air out of that space. And then if you put another fan in the doorway, sort of pushing things all in the right direction, you'll have plenty of ventilation. Actually, the only reason I need that fan is because I teach in here, and I often have 3 pancake griddles going at once for 6 students. So if you're doing it on your own, you won't need nearly as much. Good question.
And the second question is, when you're considering a photograph like to bring to your workshop, what kinds of things should we think about, like contrast, lights, darks?
Yes. Great question. So the wax will always look hazy when it's cooling, but if it's over something that is a really, really deep dark, things can stay hazy. And that's not generally the look you want. However, you can go over that haze with those pigment sticks and make it, if it's a black and white photograph, you can make that black again. So there's a lot of leeway. For example, since we're all visual, we all still remember that photograph of the calla lily that Eric just showed us, right? Those beautiful, deep, rich blacks in the background. You wouldn't want those to be kind of hazy white. So we'd just add either some pastel or some of the pigment stick to bring that black back. But when you're thinking about the photograph for bringing to class, you do want something with good contrast. If everything's all gray, it's not, the wax isn't going to help it. We can fix things, as you saw with that, the photograph at Cannon Beach. There's a lot you can do to bulk up a photograph that isn't quite working. But good contrast, a strong focal point would be a good choice. And then really after that, we just go have some fun. And the best part is that giant undo button. If you don't like something, we just either scrape it off or heat it and pull off the part of the photograph that you don't like. It's really fun. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. It's an interesting process.
It really is, and it's quite accessible. I actually was really nervous about it because I was not a painter. I did all photography all the time in college. I even, when I took a basket making class, I wove negatives together. I made my teachers crazy because I was so much into photography. But man, I am won over. I just love this process so much because there's so much you can do with it.
And to get started is like how much stuff are we talking here?
Oh, great question too. Yeah, there you don't need a whole lot. I'm gonna swing you wide again. Sorry, I am packing my part of my studio right now, so it's not pretty. But I just have let's see, a pancake griddle. And it is what you would get at Fred Meyer, like nothing special. You can get that, and you need a heat gun, which looks like this. This is about, with a coupon, 15 bucks from Michael's. So you need a way to heat your paint. You need a way to fuse your paint. So every time you lay down the paint, you heat it with something, whether it is a heat gun or I use a little creme brulee torch. I also like the giant torches, but that might not be everybody's thing. But I have propane torches in my studio for larger work, especially. And then the paint itself, you can buy it in small quantities, so it doesn't have to be particularly expensive. I sell a particular brand, Encaustic brand, and they have small sticks of paint that you add that encaustic medium to it, and it spans the paint so that you have about 4 times as much is in this little stick. So that is that's like, it's super concentrated. So I think for under, I would say, for just the basics, you could probably get away with $100 to get started. And I am all about coupons. So I can tell you all the easy ways to get started without spending a lot of money. But when you come to my class, you don't have to buy anything to bring. I provide everything for you because I have been to too many classes where I was all excited and I bought all the stuff and then it wasn't for me. And then I have all this stuff that I'll never use. So, so I supply everything. You can come try it. If you decide you're interested in doing it, I have all sorts of information on, ventilation and materials, and I can help you get started.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments for Linda?
Yeah, Linda, this is Tim. I was very interested in this, but how archival are these pieces of work, being that they're wax? I mean, do you have to take any special care with them in terms of exhibiting them, or?
Yeah, the wax itself is actually really durable. If it were just beeswax, it would not be. So if you've ever seen a candle sort of fade on a hot day where it melts a little bit, beeswax has a melting point of about 150 degrees. once we add that resin into the wax, it goes up above 220 degrees. So the joke in the encaustic community is if your painting is melting off the wall, you should leave because your house is on fire. Like you have bigger problems. But it's basically you do want to be careful if you are you know, if you put it in a trunk on a hot day, sure, you're going to have a problem. But if you just treat it as you would treat other paintings, I mean, you wouldn't do that to an oil painting either, and probably not your photographs.
No.
But the bigger problem is if the paintings melt, if they freeze. So if the paintings freeze, then the wax contracts and it can come off the panel. So the real trick for us is when we're shipping in the winter. But in your house, nothing's going to freeze. So that's not going to be a problem. The resin also makes it, doesn't just change the melting point, but it makes the surface harder. And so over the whole first year, the painting cures and it gets harder and harder so that it's more and more durable. And I had a chance to talk to a curator who works on some of those Fayem portraits I showed you with the little boy and the mummy faceplate. And they said that it's curious because the wood that they are painted on is falling apart, but the wax itself is fine.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, you're
I have a
welcome.
question. Linda, I noticed a lot of the pieces behind you and a bunch of the examples are fairly small. Is there a reason that people tend to make small pieces? Is it harder to work on larger artwork?
It is a little more challenging to work larger, but what's behind me are the samples from all my classes. So I work small, so everyone can do at least 2, sometimes 3, from beginning to end in a class. Because if you just do one large piece, you're not even going to remember where you started. So that's why those are behind me. But this, okay, hang on, I'm going to swing you around. I hope I'm not making you feel ill. This painting here
Nice.
is what is that? That is a 4 foot by 3 foot painting. It's all encaustic. And the only challenge for that is that when you fuse the paintings with that heat gun or the torch, you're going to work in sections because the way I fuse it is, especially with a heat gun, everything's visual. I'm going to do this. Okay, let me bring. This is not done, but you'll have to forgive me. So, so if I'm fusing with my heat gun, I'm going to heat up the panel a little bit here before I finish the fusing. So I'm going to do 2 steps and I'm going to heat just gently here to make it shiny and bubbly. And then I'm going to come back right away and go in little circles and that makes everything flatten out. And so if I'm working on a large panel, this is all going to be cool if I do that whole thing all over the panel, right? So I have to start working in sections. But there are lots of tricks for working large. I do art coaching as well, and I was just talking to someone about that. And one of the fun tricks is putting a heating pad behind that panel. And it just keeps it just a little bit warm so that everything flows beautifully. Yeah, so it's definitely easy enough to do work on larger panels. For photography and encaustic, you would just have to find a place to print that photograph for you, either in parts, so you can place them back together when you glue it down, or as one large painting or one large photograph. And I'm sure this group has all the resources for that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What kind of medium, like you use, you use like wood panels? Can you do it like on, I'll say a canvas or some kind of fabric or some other kind of material that's maybe not quite so rigid? Well, let's see, then the wax would crack.
Not necessarily. No, you're on the right track. You absolutely can. And if you go to my website, lindarobertsonarts.com, you'll see that I have a wax scrolls class coming up where we put the wax on paper And we work on, in that particular class, we work on paper that is blank, and then we put a design on it ourselves. But it could just as easily be a photograph on rice paper or a little heavier like sumi paper. And then you can infuse that paper with the wax, and it flows. Like when you walk past it, it flutters a little bit and the light comes all the way through it. It's absolutely gorgeous. It is a little far away for me to grab for you right now, but you can see it on my photo on my website. But it's so you can use it on paper. If you use it on fabric, then the wax makes the fabric, like, I'm gonna say crunchy. Like you can grip it and it stays in that shape. So it's not ideal. So when I make my scrolls, because I want them to look like fabric, I actually do them on paper so that it still flows as if it were silk. There's also a way to do it on canvas, but you need a different recipe. That's where we'll get technical. As I mentioned, I use the resin in my recipe for panels because it does make it more rigid and strong. But you're exactly right that if you used that same recipe on canvas, the canvas might flex and make that crack. So instead of the just the beeswax and resin, you add microcrystalline, which is much more flexible, and you don't put that Damar resin in it. So you just change up the recipe a little bit, and it's quite flexible for the canvas. Yeah, I even know someone who he paints on canvas and then he takes it off the stretcher, sends it to his gallery in a tube, and they re-stretch it. Because beeswax is very flexible, and so is microcrystalline. So so that is an option.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else?
Any other questions for Linda? Well, Linda, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us. Those are some really beautiful paintings.
Thank you.
And even some of your students' paintings were really beautiful also, and nicely done. And
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that you can get started in it pretty easily, and you can get pretty deep into it, and it has a lot of variation and a lot of different approaches.
Well, and you sure did a lot of wonderful things in there too, Bob. I mean, you just went to town. You should definitely see some of Bob's encaustic paintings.
I have a whole garage full of wax and griddles. So, well, Linda, thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Linda.
Such a pleasure. What a great group, and I'm so glad to be connected with you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Linda.
I might just say next month in June will be our members night. We'll have 3 member speakers for 30 minutes each. And the speakers will be Mike Osborne, Mark Toll, and Don Kovalevsky. We'll be talking for 30 minutes each about their work. So if there are no other questions or comments, I think we can sign off and say goodnight to everybody. So thank you all for tuning in, and have a safe night, and we'll see you all again next month. And thanks again, Linda.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, pleasure.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Bob.